Hi everybody, and welcome back to another Wednesday stream. Thank you very much for taking the time out to be with us here this evening. And we've got a really interesting discussion just ahead of us. But before we get to that one there, just to remind you all, if you're watching this on big tech platforms, deep tech platforms like Facebook and YouTube, give us a like, share, thumbs up, hit notifications. If you're watching it on brand new YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. If you can do that, folks, that would be great. Similarly, if you want to check our other social media platforms, there's many of them, but not least Odyssey, BitChute, and if you can find the links down below, you can go there and you can find content that, let's say, is a little bit too spicy for some of the deep state platforms, and therefore by definition more interesting. If you like what you're saying, or what you're seeing, what we're saying, give us the thumbs up, please, because that the algorithms like that. So do that for us, please. Finally, last but not least, if you do enjoy the content that we're putting out, go to altnewsmedia.net/donate, drop whatever you can in the hat. And if you want to keep independent creation alive, that's how you do it. So, right, without much further ado, I just want to, before we bring our guest on, because as you know, it's a Wednesday, so it's Ilana Mercer, just to let you know that obviously that Ilana's canon of written word in terms of published publications is on Amazon. You can pick it up, and I do recommend all of these books. I've read Into the Cannibal's Pot. It's really essential read. The Trump Revolution, which is also really interesting. You should read that. And Broadsides, I think, which was the original one from Ilana. So you got those books to read. And then ilanamercer.com. Go there. Make sure you follow Ilana. She puts out lots of good content. And also to her Burlia blog, which is more than a blog, really. I know she probably doesn't agree with me when I say that, but anyway, I think it's more than a blog. Anyway, that's enough. Welcome, Ilana Mercer, to the stream.
Hi, David. Wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, no, great to see you. Great to see you. The week goes by very quickly from one step to the next, doesn't it?
So, I'm looking forward to our chats. I really do.
No, well, the thing is, you know, as I was saying at the beginning of this, we've talked on this, you and I talked about deep state and the way it, to a degree, strangles conversation, authenticity, the way it limits topics for discussion, Ilana. You know, so that's why one of the things I'm keen to do is to get content like yours out. And we don't have to put it through necessarily, we will, but we put it through lots of channels. And I believe that the future is going to be about diversification away from deep tech, because deep tech is not our friend, I'm afraid, and it's not going to be our friend.
No, and I thank you for your giving me this comfortable and safe platform within which to just explore the ideas with you. I really am grateful.
Well, I think that's what the viewers like, Ilana. Is the whole point of it really is to explore ideas and to talk things through. You know, so we have got a real, again, we think alike in a lot of things, and we seem to think at the same time in a lot of things. So I saw something that was on your Burlia blog initially. The other day, I think it's a number of days ago, talking about America's low-T military versus the fighting men of Russia and China. And my God, isn't that the truth? And what I thought we would do, just to set the conversation up, is, folks, what we're really going to talk about is just what's happening to the American military in particular, I guess, versus other militaries around the world. And Ilana has written this really excellent blog post summarizing it. Although, again, Ilana, where you underplay what you say is, you say in this here, compared to the armies of our possible adversaries, the US military is high in the Disney quotient and low on testosterone. And again, this is the brilliant wordplay you say that is so appealing. So you said that. So right, folks, so you understand what we're going to talk about, we're going to play you a very short clip of what the US Army is advertising versus what the Chinese and the Russians are at. Let's have a look at this together, and then Ilana and I are going to return in 2 minutes, talk about it. Play.
This is the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems. It begins in California, with a little girl raised by two moms. Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age.
我是谁？
疯吗？
我是母亲倚在门口牵不到的那只手。
车前非常紧张，已经在。来了。
我是儿子眼里不敢靠近的陌生人。
当指挥，听党指挥。
Это первый день твоей новой жизни. То, что было вчера, не имеет значения. То, кем ты был прежде, уже никого не волнует. Теперь важно то, кем ты будешь сегодня. Что ты знаешь о себе? На что ты способен? Вопросы могут остаться без ответов, но разве ты сможешь потом спокойно спать? Узнать себя, познать границы своих возможностей. К черту граниты. Ты готов ломать себя до изнеможения. Каждый день здесь боль закаляет. Шрамы, повседневность. Это ты решил себе что-то доказать. Командир здесь только для того, чтобы ты мог увидеть в нем врага. Потому что без врага нет боя, а без боя нет победы. Но на самом деле, главный враг — это ты. Вчерашний ты. Твоя задача выделить, превзойти, стать лучше, чем он, и вернуться назад победителем. Потому что...
Okay, Ilana. So, well,
Just our faces, your face and mine when we were watching the first was just ridicule. I mean, words, there are no words to describe the Disney atmosphere, you know. I mean, our deadly Disney force. The only thing that she acquired in the military was a unibrow, a more resolute look, as well as an increased penchant for solipsistic narcissism. You know, these women in these ads don't talk about the military, esprit de corps, things that guys talk about. They talk about us in the military. It's sort of a meta narcissism, you know. And then our faces. I was watching you as well as
I can see
you
you
know.
as well.
You and I suddenly were focused on the Chinese patriotism and the poignancy of the family waiting, all those, you know, those traditional feelings we feel about men going off to war. And then finally, the Russian was just testosterone in full tilt, you know?
Yeah, you see, I want the Russian army defending me. I don't need the California equality, diversity trash that we saw in the first 30 seconds or so. But it's such a contrast, isn't it? As you say, Ilana, between, you know, three significant militaries. And honestly, I mean, that first one did take my breath away. And the thing is that it's not just the US Army, because we've seen, I think I saw an FBI one. Am I right in saying?
Yes.
Did you see it? Yeah.
Yes, it was a CIA, and it was also, the hallmark was just narcissism, who I am, and I'm brilliant, and I'm a chubby little youngster, 38 or so, touting her qualities as a woman and as a participant in this what's this intersectionality? You know, David, with me, if I think concepts have no tenuous relationship to reality, I switch off. So I don't know what intersectionality is, and you will never get me to use a pronoun that isn't grammatical. You know?
No, I don't.
This it was all about this, and who's making these things, because it is ludicrous.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. The thing about the CIA one, I was laughing to myself, because I think we've gone from Men in Black to women in little black dresses, haven't we? Really, because and it's been spreading. But let's bring it back then, Ilana. Let's bring it back to an article that you put out several years ago now, actually, which is we're just bring it up, Jed. This was Ilana's article of back in December 2017, I think. Which again, brilliant, as I expect from you, Ilana, such a brilliant play. From gender neutrality to gender fluidity in the military. Obviously, you saw all this coming, Ilana, because at this point, I'm right in thinking, when you wrote this article, this was because Trump's, if we just bring it up, Jed, just there, the first paragraph. So that was Trump's directive, LGBTQ plus blah, 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 directive, has been overturned, and at that point you kind of went in on it. And so maybe talk us through where your thinking was coming from at that point.
Well, I had always covered the American military as a spent force, just about, because this whole process happened in the 90s from the perspective, and note I credit my sources,
Yes.
from the perspective of a brilliant shoe leather reporting by Stephanie Goodman, who wrote the book that is featured on the title there, A Kinder, Gentler Military. And she really was, as much as her reporting about what was happening in the 90s, instigated by the usual culprits. It was Cheney, it was Bush, even William Cohen. She talks about the whole impetus to make them there've always been outstanding women in the military. There was very few, like an Amazonian force, and chosen on merit. And but the impetus in the 90s, as she explains in this very fine book of hers, was a movement to making the military reflective of America. In other words, probably 50% female, and of course lowering standards, making it not a merit-based program, but a political production. So, but she, said, her concepts are no longer, even relevant, because we've moved from, gender neutrality to gender fluidity. So the LGBTQ program and production has been brought full force into the military. And note that the people who stood up, the commander-in-chief was then Trump in 2017, and he said, he wrote, I think it was an executive order, saying no LGBTQ in combat. But the chief protagonists against this were in opposition to this. Were the military brass.
But how has that come about? How has it come to the point where the military brass favor what I would say is the demasculization of the military itself? How, Ilana, is this happened?
I guess it's just the one quote I think that I keep repeating in everything I write about the military, and that's not really my beat, is that I think it is repeated in this column as well, is that the military is government.
Yes,
it works like government, it's financed like government, sports the same inherent malignancies like government, chief of which is liberalism, and I also list interventionism, propositionalism, and all these reverse racism, feminism, statism. It's an arm of government. And I think, and you hear many of the Fox News commentators, I think I heard Greg Gutfeld, a very funny guy, saying, if only government could operate like the military, which operates more like a private corporation, which is totally incorrect. The military is freighted with all the same malignancies, and pathological political correctness as the government is. It's an arm of government. So I think that's how the extension of the deep state to the Pentagon, of course, was always very liberal, very progressive. But I think progressively, a military friend of mine, decorated, said they call them the perfume generals.
Right.
And these people, really vicious against Trump, have simply taken over the top.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think that the really important insight that you're putting there, Ilana, is that the military is government. That it is the same entity. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised, actually,
Nope.
when it then takes on the same colors, the same prejudices, the same narrative as that pushed by government. But governments don't operate in isolation. So if we look at what's happening in the US military, and as we saw in that clip at the beginning, compare that to what the Russians are putting out or what the Chinese are putting out, what an embarrassment. What an embarrassment for the US military.
Yes, but it also reflects a wider culture, that the Anglo-American culture is completely not chauvinistic, and by chauvinistic I mean centered on its own patriotism, its own history, its own sense of identity, where there's many other nations that are not Anglo-American are strictly not multicultural and are concerned with keeping the patriotic spirit alive, and that includes, by extension, the military.
And also, a good point. And don't you think that the warrior spirit itself, the warrior spirit, which is surely the central animus of any effective military, that's gone missing in certainly in the Western militaries anyway. I think.
And you see it across society, that our spirit is not the warrior spirit, but it is the woman warrior, as in worrying all the time, whether it's COVID infesting every single nook and cranny of life, and the invasiveness everywhere you see. Our institutions are run by, are feminized and not by any people who follow an immutable standard as we used to, but people who follow an agenda. And so they are warriors, not as in worry all the time, kvetch and worry, They're not worried.
We've gone from warriors to worriers. Exactly right, actually. Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Yeah.
And by the way, big on the military culture is the other thing that is an extension of the state and government. Propositionalism. And everywhere, in fact, there was an outcry, I think it was the Navy, that had a slogan once that people still actually objected to it: a force for good in the world. And that is what we call propositionalism. In other words, the idea that America is an idea, and its main mission in the world is to make sure that the nations of the world are kind of caricatures or clones of it, and spread democracy. Often at the point of a bayonet. And so the military, definitely, often you find these soldiers talking about how touched they were working with other people, nothing about the defense of the United States, as which to me is what the military is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that annoys me is that there's an ad which I'm sure our producer will have seen on British TV, Ilana, for the British Army, and essentially it's selling the notion that the purpose of the British Army is to go overseas and help save, it appears to be, tribes in some unspecified part of, looks like Africa to me, but can't be sure. And I'm thinking, no, that's not the point. That's not the deal. But yet that has been pushed. But of course, that's one of the reasons, for example, here in the UK, recruitment levels into the UK, into the British Army, have fallen enormously.
Yes.
It's a problem we've got.
Because the army, and this is what Stephanie Goodman says so wonderfully in this book, The Kinder, Gentler Military, she says that nary a thought from the 90s when they worked on the gender neutrality to now has anyone considered the reaction of the ordinary grunt to all these. How do they interact with all this awfulness, this politicized atmosphere? Well, how does it influence you when your mate suddenly grows breasts and bats eyelashes at you? There's no thought to that. And in fact, even these Israelis, we always are deferring to them because they do have situations of actual combat where they have to defend hearth and home. But even the Israelis have observed that men in combat tend to linger over women if they fall, if something happens. They become protective, and that endangers the entire mission. And women are certainly not part of combat in Israel.
Well, I was going to ask you that question, actually. What do you think of, because we've had the same drive here in Britain to have women on the front line. And I mean, I'm not a military man, but I'm a man. And I would understand that the male instinct is to protect women. But if I'm going into war, I don't want them near me. I want to be able to go and carry out my mission and get the enemy, basically. So from my point of view, women in the front lines are a complete abomination. What do you think?
Absolutely, and also it definitely introduces sexual tension. You see, the whole impetus is cancelling the idea of biology, and we know that the progressive left is certainly of a mind that there is no difference between man and woman, and so this is an extension of this. And you can deny the sexual tension and dynamics in the military, but this certainly fouls up the mission. The mission is politicized. It's become diffused. If you see the quality of recruits, they've cancelled most, IQ tests, etc. That used to be prevalent, at least in the U.S. military.
Yeah.
And so it's really become cannon fodder, for all the excursions overseas. It's a big whorehouse. It's a welfariate. That's what it is, the military.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, one of the things we see over this side of the pond, Ilana, is, for example, there's lots of TV programs, military TV programs set in Iraq and places like that, where it's a woman she's the hero of she's out with her squad. And she's a very cute looking one, actually, cast on her looks entirely. And it's so implausible, but they're selling that image all the time, and she's adding that extra quality that the blokes don't have. And it's appalling stuff, isn't it?
I'm so wedded to reality. I think my husband went through the corporate, what's the word? I mean, some sort of indoctrination, and he's quite patient with these, television programs where the 100-pound waif with silicone breasts beats a 400-pound gangster and cuffs him. And I say, I just won't watch them. I don't know anything about the recent television series. The most I will tolerate is Law and Order, where you can, it's denuded of reality. There's no reality to it. There are physical differences, and obviously this is just a gimmick, this program, with a good-looking 100-pounder with all the accoutrements of fashion and makeup and all that. Doing her kicks with stilettos, mind you.
Yeah, and with immaculate makeup, even in the middle of Syria or Iraq, wherever it was. I used to laugh at the fact that her makeup was immaculate, and it was probably that was it's all just a fantasy, isn't it? But it does obscure the central truth that our Western militaries, in particular, I think, have been absolutely emasculated. They have been.
And what happens if we do need a military, as seems evident? Because if COVID has shown anything, is that I'm not a xenophobe or anything, but China is emerging as a force to reckon with. And are we prepared? At one stage, we were in this vast ocean. Our submarines were colliding. What was that? If not some sort of institutionalized rot? There were very many. The Navy had quite a few inquiries. I don't remember the precise ones, 2-3 years ago, where there were deficiencies in the way the equipment was operated. And you have to, see that in China and Russia, affirmative action and representation and quotas is anathema. They just don't do that.
No, and actually, there was skirmishes on the India-China border. As you probably saw a couple of months back, and talking to
David, sorry, only by watching BBC International, not by the American news.
All right. Well, there were those skirmishes, and actually, at one point, the Chinese and the Indian military were fighting. I think it was, hand-to-hand combat, and it was vicious combat. And the Indian army takes a pride in being strong and masculine, like the Chinese, to be fair. And I'm just wondering, well, where would America come in that? I mean, would somebody be there trying to say, "Hey, stop, guys, let's talk about trans rights. Let's talk about all the real big issues of the day. Can we just put the fighting aside and sing Kumbaya?" So there's a big problem. If we ever had to go to war, we couldn't.
But it's also worse. There's a sort of treason class. The brass is almost like a treason class. And if our military intervened there and did the right thing and knocked a few heads around, or even defended itself, these people would be on so-called desk duty and under investigation. Now, I'm not supporting, the other thing, in 2003, as a libertarian who has not supported any one of our wars, except the incursion into Afghanistan when the Taliban, when the Al-Qaeda was taking shelter there, Bush correctly asked for extradition. When that didn't happen, he had the right to go in and get them. But of course, that became an occupation. But I think in 2003, writing about Israel, I said, a brave nation fights because it must. A cowardly nation fights because it can. So that pretty much tells you what I think of the missions of the Anglo-American military. It's certainly not defending our borders, which are absolutely porous.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's where they should be, actually. And actually, the same would apply to the British military. We should be defending our borders, but we don't. We don't. There's no defense of that, and that's a fundamental reason to have a military, by the way. But it doesn't work that way. But I just wanted to ask you about, you mentioned Israel, and the Israeli army obviously, has a pretty decent reputation, I think, as a fighting class. How does any of this play, to the best of your knowledge, into the Israeli army? Are they similarly affected by these confections?
I haven't kept up on that, but I do respect the fact that you can see when everybody, that's why at one stage I said it was sort of, my tongue maybe was firmly in my cheek, and maybe I was being a little sarcastic, because as a libertarian, I obviously don't support the draft, but I think the draft would put a dampener on many of the wars, because everyone in Israel does go to the military. Yeah. And Jewish fathers and mothers do not want to see their sons come back in body bags. No. And in fact, when Ariel Sharon, had this excursion into Lebanon, was it the 80s? Left and right thronged the streets. And when he was going to regime change and do a little bit of American-style tinkering, men and women in Israel just, that they lined the streets from Haifa to Tel Aviv and stopped that. So because they have the draft and they use the military to defend their borders, as it should be, they don't go to war easily. Which our military has a mentality of adventures abroad, and that, of course, is certainly dependent on the massive military-industrial complex.
Yeah. One of the other things that's changed in warfare is technology, and the fact now that, you can do so much remotely. The days of, what sort of wars we used to fight in the last century, till a degree, are redundant now, because they can do all kinds of things remotely. I wonder, does that allow some of this to fester?
That's such a good point. In fact, I have heard that the Israeli military is becoming fat and a little bit atrophied. They're not as lean as they used to be because of the magnificent technology. You drop bombs from there's a certain, I don't know, I haven't studied the Israeli situation, but certainly the droning, Obama did. I think he killed many, many civilians via drone. Bush fewer, but still that was just gathering momentum. There's a certain cowardice in using technology, not having to fight face to face, that makes war easier. Yeah. I think you're right there.
Yeah. So what you get is you get the kind of teenage nerds who are good at playing their, I don't know, I don't, I'm not sure what the term, their PlayStations or whatever it is, Ilana, and they're good at all this stuff, and that then can be taken to the higher level, actually brought into the military. And so some guy can be sitting somewhere in the States and he can be flying the drones into anywhere in the world. And therefore, maybe that does, does allow the weakening to continue, because it's not regiments going over the top anymore. It's not as well, but that's not to say that it can't be, because we've mentioned India, China, and the world's a dangerous place. And, the occasions will come when that does occur. And I would not want to be reliant on, I've got to be honest, on the US Army. Although here's the thing, doesn't the US Army as a whole, does it not vote pretty much overwhelmingly Republican?
It used to. And, when I was researching my book, Into the Cannibals Pot, one of the scholars, all the scholars practically had all been to the military. It used to be standard. Everybody went to the military, and it was Republican, but you can see the shift. I mean, the brass is definitely not Republican. I guess the recruits, I think a lot of them Southerners, white Southerners from, white Southerners are definitely more conservative, and that's why the discrepancy. And now the whole program against deplorables or against Trump voters is weeding out. They're further weeding out from intelligence, from police. Is the army next? Weeding out the real people who, their patriotism in my mind is mistaken. It's to Uncle Sam more than anything, but still the patriotism of these recruits from poor boys from the South is certainly going to be weeded out, because they do have more of a propensity to be of the right. But I would say the military is shifting tremendously. In fact, there is a blog of mine in which I took the economist numbers that the tipping point is arriving. And every second person you see, I mean, Kitzinger, one of the, we call him renegade Republican, but the rotting Republicans that are rising against the more populist the Trump base's impetus, he's extremely liberal. So more and more you see people talking the talk. The top brass is speaking about equalizing and spreading harmony and women and LGBTQ and everything but the mission and the purpose of a lean, mean fighting force.
Yeah, which is, as you say, that is the central purpose of it, and it's been lost. I think, Ilana, I think we have located. We're gonna play it for you now, so that you know what I'm talking about. Actually, we have, I think. Let me just double check. We got this British Army one. I wanted to play it as a treat for you, Ilana. If we can just get it lined up, I think we hopefully have it. So this is how the British Army is positioning itself to Brits in terms of come and join us. So if we can play that, hopefully, action. Here we go.
What's the first step towards victory? Failure. You fail.
Come on, keep going.
You learn. So you can win when it really matters.
So, there you go.
It's also very vague. It's not focused, is it? What was the meaning that you can work out your insecurities in the military? You can work on yourself with self-improvement, your fitness.
Therapy.
Shouldn't that be resolved once you go into the military? Especially your fitness level.
Well, also in a country which is 85% white, which the UK is, it's interesting. Let's just leave it like that in terms of the recruits that the British Army is trying to attract. But actually, the fundamental issue is this: they can't get the candidates anymore. The working class, the traditional British working class over here, don't have the same affinity to it, and I'm very proud to know.
Really? Is that happening?
Yeah, because it's too woke. It's too woke. And those, the problem is the woke agenda, where it fits into the liberal strata, it doesn't permeate down, or it hasn't totally permeated down into the working class.
Has recruiting lessened because there's always the offer of financing education, and a lot of poor boys, need that, the military salary, and have flocked to it. So that really is suffering, the recruitment.
I think all Western militaries are struggling, and that's why I thought it's such a good point for us to talk about tonight. Yeah. It is this systemic undermining, Ilana, that we all face. You in the States, us over here, and that's before we get into some of the European military, which is nearly an oxymoron. But we'll not go there. We'll not discuss the French military. That's a contradiction in terms. What was it they used to say? The French military, their tanks had only one gear, reverse. Isn't that what they said about this?
Or as The Simpsons says, the cheese eating surrender. What surrender?
Yeah, cheese eating surrender monkeys, which is probably unfair to monkeys.
Yes, it is. Actually, Macron has been much more conservative in terms of defending some history, and frankly, they don't have multiculturalism, the French, and they don't. I don't believe they have affirmative action. So I remember the whole neocon establishment was full of Schadenfreude when in 2005 the suburbs that are usually housing the North African cohort exploded in riots, and our people, in fact, people that have reversed. You and I have always been on the same topic, solid on the topics, but I noted in a column how full of Schadenfreude the Americans were, like Mark Stein and a whole host of them who've shifted to our side now, saying that, we integrate people so well, we have multiculturalism. The French don't have that. Well, the French don't have multiculturalism, and you can see that still they do have some sort of pride in their history, in their language, and there hasn't been so much a cultural watering down. But there's pressure. There is, I know, pressure from the US government on all, be it East Europe or West Europe, to adopt this festering egalitarian multiculturalism. And you have Black Lives Matter in London. Why? England.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. Well. I don't want to go into it, but I did notice that Joe Biden, I think, president, the most super duper legitimate president ever. He said, I've noticed he said today, Ilana, by the way, that it was George Floyd's death was more meaningful than Martin Luther King's. Did you see that remarkable?
I didn't see that, but I did hear him say that it's reverberated throughout the world, but that's because of a real sick exportation of these American ideas. From critical race theories is an American deformity, aberration. Mm-hmm. How did it get to, when I was researching into the Cannibals Pod, I found out that there were so many NGOs. I remember, that's why I'm saying that I'm still from the old school who, knows how came up, knew the apartheid regime, knew all the politicians that were involved in the negotiations and that. And I remember reading my first article about affirmative action. It was written by an American in our Cape Town press, and thinking, wow, this is a sick, crazy idea. All these ideas were imported through NGOs, and I document that also in Into the Cannibals Pot, and instantiated in different countries where they don't belong. They're inorganic. They're inorganic in Britain or in South Africa. But now everything, the world has been flattened by this American sensibility.
Yeah, but actually NGOs would be another really good topic to have a conversation on, because they are like a global cancer in my view, and also extremely significant in all kinds of ways. But Ilana, we have come. Unfortunately, the time flies by really quick. So
when you're having fun, when we're having fun, yeah.
When we're having fun, it does. But I am always conscious of the clock. So I think, you know, the thing is that you've been, I mean, not just on this topic, but on so many topics, you know, you're way ahead of the field in highlighting the issues and bringing our attention to the consequences of some of this insanity that's been going on. So I thought, it's, you know, as I say, what you've written, not just in Burley Blog and that article, but previously on this topic, it's so far ahead of the field that I hope everybody watching does, you know, make sure you go and read Ilana's sort of columns on these issues, because.
And by the way, David, in my blog, my very brief blog about this, that Jed showed the videos, this was assembled on Anne's Review by one of their writers. And of course, I cited him because it was these videos were assembled. And so Tucker later featured it. I'm not sure he featured all the assembly of the ridiculousness, the Disney-fied military, and the Russian. And however, it certainly originated on the Anne's Review. So.
Yes, I mean, as you say, it's very important to give attribution. Yes. We both agree on that as well.
Yes.
So, Ilana, listen, I want to thank you very much for being with me tonight. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thanks, everybody, for watching this one. Do make sure you follow Ilana also on her social media channels over on Twitter, on Gab and Parler, whenever Parler's working, which is not very often. But anyway, regardless, make sure you do follow her so you can get her commentary on social media as well as her written commentary. That's it from me for tonight. Catch up with you folks soon, and thanks very much for your time. Good night, everybody.